Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Women Leadership Series. Today we have our very esteemed guest, Thabisa Mkhwanazi, who will be chatting us through her career journey, as well as what it means really for the direction that the world is going in. We all know that there's a lot of uncertainty with regards to job security with the changing work landscape. We are in the fourth industrial revolution. What does that mean for, regular careers that are being replaced by digitization, automation, and what have you, and how can we as career people who are in the workplace kind of pivot to go into that direction. So before I go and delve much deeper into the topic, I'm going to hand over to Paul Musiki, who is the chairperson of the BMF in Gauteng, to give us her welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Mandisa. Good evening, Thabisa. Good evening, BMF members and friends of the BMF. I think mine is just to do a quick welcoming and a few sentences and opening remarks before our guest speaker delves into this very interesting topic, really. We, as the BMF, really one of our pillars is socio-economic transformation and managerial leadership. So this really falls smack into aligns really, well with our pillars. I mean, the question with 4IR, as Mandisa mentioned, the future of work is really a conundrum when you think about digitization and the things that are really the technologies and the innovations that are coming up. I mean, I read somewhere that in Germany, now we no longer have a bike mechanic. We have a bike I can't even pronounce it. Bike mechatronics technician. So these are things that that some of us who were born a few years ago, I'm not going to reveal my age, are really having to grapple with. But I think it also becomes an important thing for us in terms of how we then position ourselves, to still be in corporate or in work, if that's what you choose for yourself, to be a corporate animal, or what it means for you as an entrepreneur if you want to then be in the forefront and continue to be sustainable. But more importantly, for some of us who come from rural areas, rural townships, what does it mean for us who and how can we then help and ensure that communities take up these opportunities? I mean, with the high unemployment rate in South Africa, high youth unemployment rate for that matter, being a question that keeps some of us awake. How do we then leverage and make sure that people are ready? So Thabisa, we're really looking forward to what you're going to share with us. I think what's really exciting is also the fact that you're a marketer. So you will also, I'm hoping that you will also delve a little bit into our personal branding a bit in terms of how we position ourselves. Thank you. Look forward to a great evening.
Okay, I think we've sufficiently introduced the topic. I think everyone is excited. I just wanted to share something quickly that I came across when I was researching this topic, and it was that, a couple of years ago, the chess master, the global chess master was playing chess against a machine, and it beat him. And they asked him what he would do the next time he was pitted against the machine, and he said that he would bring a hammer. And I'm hoping that what we get out of this is that it will open everyone's minds up to not wanting to bring a hammer, but what it is that we need to do for ourselves in order for us to move with the wave versus going the opposite direction. So with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Thabisa. Yeah. Oh, and I just wanted to mention to all the attendees, Thabisa had mentioned that she would like to do a bit of a presentation, but she would like this to be very much an interactive session. So we'd appreciate that as you are listening along, if you came along with some questions, if you could please ask that. We'll have a mini Q&A session at the end, as well as obviously questions that will arise as Thabisa is presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandisa, and good evening, BMF and friends of the BMF. I consider myself as a child of the BMF and as a friend, a dear friend of the BMF. It's incredibly humbling for me and an incredible honor to spend the evening with you, to spend a couple of, an hour or so really putting our heads together. And I think it's so important that dialogues like the one that we're having tonight continue and we keep going deeper and deeper, because we can honestly get better as we do it. I also want to thank Nkosinathi, who is a proud card-carrying BMF member, but also part of my team, who quite randomly reached out to me a while ago and said, "Boss lady, can someone from the BMF reach out to you about something?" But very times it's nothing hectic. Fast forward to what I call a hospital pass from him, and then fast forward to what has turned out to be a great opportunity this evening. So Nkosinathi, thank you for the hospital pass. A couple of reasons why this evening was a definite yes for me. Firstly, the purpose, and Mpho spoke about kind of the founding purpose and vision of the BMF, and they're so closely aligned to who I am and the things, and a big part of my story and my journey, that it would be an automatic yes. But secondly to that, I think now, as much as it was back then in 76 when the BMF was founded, are the ideals and kind of this movement towards managerial leadership, but also socioeconomic development, so critical to our nation. And again, in the context of the topic we're going to delve into tonight, as we talk about the changes in the world that we exist in, those ideals hold. We cannot get left behind when we start talking fourth industrial revolution. We cannot get left behind as we start talking digitization. We have to make sure that we're equipping ourselves and preparing ourselves to really kind of be at the forefront of some of that change. And so that was one of the big reasons. The other one really is around, the BMF, often I describe it as coming home. It was incredibly dear to Baba. And so it always is an honor to spend time with the BMF as a child of the BMF. And so thank you for that opportunity tonight. Secondly to that is I explored the topic with Mandisa, and I realized that, this really was also focused on women. It was in celebration of women. I know the need, and I'm a beneficiary of evenings like tonight, of being equipped, of hearing someone else's story, and really kind of opening my mind and planting different seeds in my heart about what is possible for me. And so I hope tonight is a space where you are able to reflect, you're able to pause, firstly, take in some of what I'm going to share, but also reflect on your own journey. And I think as we do that, let's look for opportunities to realign where we may not be aligned, but also to really celebrate our resilience as women in business and corporate, in entrepreneurship, in the public sector, to celebrate the progress that we have made, though not enough. The strides have been made. And then particularly to celebrate the future that lies ahead of us, and the opportunities that are there and the opportunities that are opening in front of us. And so, Mandisa set up the topic in a really great way. And when I looked at this topic of career development in the midst of digitization, a couple of things happened for me. Firstly was, but I'm not a digital specialist. So why would the guys want me to talk about career development within digitization? And I very quickly caught myself on that, because the reality is we all are. The reality is we are all living in a very digitized world. We are all operating in spaces where we are having to adapt. And any experience that each one of us has is valuable enough to really help the next person miss certain parts of the pain that you have gone through. A little bit about, you guys will hear a bit about my story as I kind of take you through my thoughts and my experiences around this. But, you know, I grew up in the Eastern Cape. I was born in the former Transkei, grew up there, and that shaped a lot of my perspective on education. It shaped a lot of my perspective on the world. It shaped a lot of my perspective on our beautiful nation. And I think I carried a lot of that with me through my journey, and you might see certain colors of that filter through as I share my journey with you. But one of the first things that stood out as I looked at the topic was really there's three buckets to this topic. There's the idea of career, there is the idea of development, and then there's this idea of digitization. And I want to jump straight into digitization first, because the reality of it, and I loved how the team had worded it, because they said in the midst of, and the reality of it is that digitization is a contextual topic. Career development has existed and will continue to exist regardless of what the contextual happenings in or season, or where business goes, or where, you know, globally we go, and the advancements that we make as humanity. Career development, though, will hold steady. So let's get through the digitization pieces and that story, and then we'll delve into career development, which I'm incredibly passionate about. So let's talk about digitization. You know, it is a context. And one of the things that has happened for us is this topic has always been what I describe as a future back topic, a topic where every organization has it in their strategy, every organization has it in, you know, transformational growth drivers. We all have it in our small businesses. It doesn't matter where you are, the public sector really is delving and formulating policy around this, but always about future preparedness. Now, what's happened with COVID-19 is that a topic that's always been engaged with as a preparing myself for the future has become a topic of the now. It has become a, how do I navigate the now? Because all of a sudden, some of these things, for example, organizations have been preparing ourselves into the future for when we have a remote workforce. We have a fully remote workforce. We have a fully remote call center workforce. We have a fully remote everything. You know, organizations have been debating policies around flexible working hours and this and that for decades, preparing ourselves for this future generation that would come and operate in a business that's fully digitalized. And so with COVID-19, that really was accelerated because a lot of those things we were preparing ourselves for had to be executed. And so even when we look at an evening like tonight, where we normally would have been in a room, I would have had the fortune of being able to read your faces. One of the hard things about virtual engagements is you cannot read how engaged the audience is. So I hope you guys will do a little thumbs up now and again so that I know that you're all still there. But at the same time, there's a broadening that's happened to conversations like this. So something that previously would have been limited to a group of people who would be able to attend physically has now been opened up to the entire country, effectively. We have recordings of a lot of very powerful tools. And one of the gifts that we have been given is we now have content for people to consume. And so, Paul, when you talk about, you know, where do we learn and how do we learn? One of the things that's come out of a lot of this is an aggregation of content. And particularly in the space that I'm in now, where that is the business that we are in and the business that we do is content. Part of the currency that people need to get used to, and whatever space of business you're in, and whether you're in the public sector, you're an entrepreneur, or you're in corporate, one of the things you need to start thinking about is, how comfortable are you with content curation? How comfortable are you with content creation? How comfortable are you with consumption of content, right? And so really for me, there's this new context that we have and that we're talking about gifts us a couple of things. The first one is uncertainty, right? This whole idea of digitization, and Mandisa, you spoke about it in your intro around what happens to the jobs. And Paul, you described what's happened in Germany with, you know, a bicycle engineer having a new title. People can have entire lucrative, you know, professions that are YouTube based and that are digitally based. There are jobs that we don't even know are going to come, and they're going to hit us in the next year to 2 years to 3 years. And so how do you, within that uncertainty, flip that, right? One of the things uncertainty does that I want to call out though is fear. And the moment you allow this change to grip you in a place of fear, your career development really is impacted. Because remember, the same way individually we're trying to make sense of this, leaders and organizations are trying to make sense of it, and they're looking for people who are willing to pick up this thing and figure it out as they go along. And so if you choose to hold on to the fear, the system is going to spit you out, whether you are an entrepreneur or you're in public or you are in corporate. The system will exit you because it's looking for people who are able to do that. I think what happens for me in uncertainty when we look through history, and I think again, I look at the history of the BMF, we've always been able to, those people who don't operate in fear are able to pioneer and lead new ways. And so I think particularly as women, for example, this is a window and a gap where we can make incredible advancements to the very purpose and the very ideals of organizations like the Black Management Forum. Because at this point, policies and everything are out the door because they're not delivering the results that we need to deliver. And so, for example, as a working mom, the idea that organizations are now fully remote takes one conversation off the table that I've been trying to have for the last 12, 15 years of flexibility and agility and being able to work remotely and all of that. And so I think when we start looking at digitization as a gift to us from a female perspective, any non-included or excluded group, this is a real opportunity for us to really reposition ourselves in spaces where we're able to really move forward. We spoke about the fourth industrial revolution, and one of the things I love about this and the mindset that I want us to adopt as we talk through the rest of this evening is revolution talks about a significant history-making change. It's not an evolution. I have encountered, I think I've experienced in my own self, where you kind of say I adopt the revolution idea, but actually you are evolving. You're not really in a revolution. There has to be a very sharp, significant change in how you show up and in what you do, and that's really important. There then are these 14 transformational technologies that you will often hear spoken about in the context of digitization. First things first, guys, hit Google and learn what those 14 transformational technologies are. You don't need to be an expert on them, but you need to know what they are, because they are the 14 technologies that are believed to be shaping the world and to be shaping every single industry in the world over the next short period of time. What we also know, though, is that in Africa and on the continent that we are on, we leapfrog technology. And so what we know is going to happen is that the 14 are going to hit us back, whereas other markets have had a bit of time to have 4 and then 3 and then 7. We know, based on everything that we've seen, whether you look at the cell phone evolution in our country or any other technology in our country, we leapfrog technology significantly. And so it's going to hit us like a wave after a wave after a wave after a wave. And so as we talk about career development, we need to be thinking about how do we steady ourselves so that when these technologies keep coming, we've built a business, or we've built an organization, and we've built individuals that are able to bend to some of these changes. In my time, and Paul, I love that you spoke about, we said we wouldn't mention how old some of us are, but in my time, I've lived through groups like the Holiday Inn, being phenomenal groups around the world, to now the biggest hotel group does not own a building, called Airbnb. The biggest taxi company in the world does not own a car, Uber. I lived from phone books to big data, where it's all about big data. And so when we start talking about how do we position ourselves and how do we navigate this, a big part of it is know what is relevant. So let me take you back a few years. I'm going to say it's a few years, many years ago. I walked into the buildings at Mhlanga Rocks on La Lucia, on Mhlanga Rocks Drive at Unilever as a very bright-eyed grad in their grad program. At that time, for example, competitions in the world of a marketer, people would write in a postcard or a letter to the OMO mail bag. It would then be posted in. We would then wait a couple of months for all the post and the competition period to end. Then the ABMs, or assistant brand managers, would have the joy of walking into this room with auditors to choose the bag that the winner would be chosen out of. Once that bag was selected, you would try shake this bag and look for the winning envelope, right? Fast forward to today, we run competitions completely digitally. We can turn them around in a couple of minutes. We can select a winner in a couple of minutes. The auditors have everything they need. We have all the sophistication and data around who our customers are. I can tell you how many times you've entered a competition. I can eliminate you when I need to. And again, it's a very small example of, at the heart of all things, though, the concepts remain the same. And so I really want to demystify digitization and go, at the core of it, what we are trying to do and what we need to do remains the same. We want to reward and we want to incentivize customers into a certain behavior. All that's changing around that is how we execute it. It's how we do it. And I think when we're able to differentiate that, the fear starts to dissolve. So this idea that a robot will replace you starts to dissolve, because someone needs to program the robot. Someone needs to run the AI engine behind the robot. Someone needs to be thinking about the next generation robot. And so as we start thinking through that, we start to ease off a little bit. The other big thing in terms of, this area for me and my personal journey has been, am I still relevant? And so from a career perspective, or my journey, I started off at Unilever. And like I said to you guys, I was the Omo mail bag generation. We had above the line media. We had SABC at the time, I believe, if I remember properly, had 4 radio stations. None of the original radio stations that you'll listen to existed at the time. You couldn't stream radio. You could not stream content. We had DSTV or Mnet at the time, and then transformed into DSTV, who at the time had very limited advertising. And so again, looking at this transformation of not only the types have changed, the quantities have changed, and even the existing players have changed how they play. And what I was left to ask myself is, how do I remain relevant? What are the things that I need to do so that I'm still relevant, that I'm not the Omo bag lady and the shield girl and kind of where all my origins are. And one of the things is, like I said to you guys earlier, you have to know what's relevant. You have to at least keep up with that to help yourself start the journey of remaining relevant. Secondly, you need to be curious and agile and adaptable. Curiosity is the biggest gift you can give yourself in an uncertain world. One of the things digitization is really shifting for us is unconnected industries are now connected. So all of a sudden, big data is a thing. I need to learn about technologies that in the world of, having sold chicken and deodorants and stuff, had nothing to do with what I do. Now they do. Now I need to understand AIs. I need to understand how that runs in order to run my business model. When we talk about understanding how things impact, a good place to start is look at the impact on the P&L. Look at the impact on you, even if you are an entrepreneur and you have a small business. Start looking at your cost lines and your income streams and going, what's changing? Be curious about what's changing. Be curious about, what an online sale costs you versus a physical sale costs you. If you're in consulting, be curious about on-site consultations versus non-on-site consultations. So that really, really is key. The other big thing, guys, is you have to surround yourself with people who are relevant. We like to think we can stay relevant, but the Gosnatis and people like that in my team help me. As I conversate with them and they come in and they're excited and they're telling me about Udemy and all these courses that you can do. And I'm like, okay, whoa, what's that? Show me. What does it do? How does it do it? I spend quite a bit of time on judging panels across the industry to help to surround myself with people who are relevant, to surround myself with people who have a genuine interest in the technologies, because I don't, and really to build my muscle that way. And then finally, relevance is about courage, guys. This whole space of digitization is really about courage. You must have the courage to walk into something and you're not sure what it's going to look like on the other side. You're not sure that your job title, I've read journal articles and engage with people around the world in marketing, and we ask ourselves the question of how relevant is a chief marketing officer in an organization? Will organizations of the future still have CMOs if brands are no longer what they are, right? If people aren't consuming the way they were consuming and we don't sell the way that we're selling. Again, having the courage to walk into those spaces, even if what comes out on the other side may look different. Then let's chat a little bit, change gears and talk about career. I was quite intrigued because, you know, one of the things for me was around, what is a career? Is it a job? Is it a position? Like, do you have a career when you get to a certain position? Is it a profession that you choose? How do you know and when do you decide this is now my career? Like, at what point do I go, okay, I have a career in marketing? Because it just felt uncomfortable for me. And I think a big part of that was because of the context that we've just spoken about. I think I've learned on my journey to be really open and not box myself in to a title and not box myself into a specific role, but actually kind of focus on the things that I do and the things that I want to do. And so really kind of hit Google to look it up. And a career is really defined as an occupation that you undertake for a significant amount of time with opportunities to progress. So based on that definition, I would guess the argument would be I have a career in marketing because I have been in the occupation for a significant period of time with opportunities around. And so again, to go back to my story, as a 17-year-old, a couple of months from turning 18, I walked into the University of Natal. And I had no idea what I wanted to study. I'd been accepted for a couple of different paths that I could explore when I got there. I'd been asked this question pretty much from when I was a kid, what do you want to be? And the reality is this question intensifies the older you get. So when you're small, growing up in the Transkei, I'd go to my grandmother's home and the question would be, yo, Zobaitishana, you're so grown, you're going to be a teacher, you're so grown up. And then you'd kind of say no, or maybe, or yes, I don't know, I want to be a doctor, I want to be this. But once you get to high school, this question starts to intensify for you. And then the application process into universities comes along and this question of what do you want to be really intensifies. I didn't have the fortune, I guess, that some of my peers and my friends had, which was this clarity on going in, CASA, coming out on the other side, tax. Guys, I genuinely knew a couple of things that I was interested in. Also, though, because of the time that I was raised in, the known professions were incredibly esteemed. And so, you know, the legal field, the accountancy field, all these fields were opening up, and rightfully so, our parents were steering us to these professions that they didn't have opportunities to go into, but that were now becoming incredibly esteemed. So the engineerings, the medicines, the BScs, and all of that. And so in I walked, and I did media studies for a week and realized it wasn't the one. Purely because I had to do lots of assignments, and that is not a strong point of mine. I then shifted into a BCom accounting degree. Life was great for first year. I'd never done accounting in my life. It was my first time in an accounting class, I think, since standard 6. So you can tell how old I am, it was standards. I then kind of did first year, and first year went okay. And I'd always had a love for numbers, and so this seemed like a good plan. Second year rolls by, and long story short, guys, I failed into the career I now have. And the point of that story, firstly, is often we follow people's careers and we miss some of the spots where they didn't get their degrees in record time, where they failed into it. Second year accounting showed me flames, like real flames. And coming out of that, though, I knew that I'd fallen in love with management and marketing during that time. And so I shifted gears, and I think much to my mom and my dad's distress of they had pictured the CA coming along. I said to them, this is not going to happen. But again, I tell the story because often we pick up people's careers quite late. And we miss these chunks of some of the struggles and some of the adaptations they've had to make. And so really kind of failing, what did failing into my career look like? I began working at Unilever, like I've said to you guys. I spent a number of years with them. I had the opportunity to have a development posting in Asia, living in the Philippines and launching deodorants into China. I then returned, worked across some of the top brands in the country, and it was absolutely exceptional for me. I returned into the country, carried on working for them for a bit, and then joined a company called Marico, South Africa, which was a consumer division of the former Enaleni Pharmaceuticals. There I got to work on some mergers and acquisitions, so that accounting knowledge came into good stead at that point. It was a developing company. It was the biggest FMCG business in India at the time, and they were passionate about buying brands across developing markets. And so I got to learn the business of brands at that time, traveled to places like Vietnam. We bought some big South African brands, bid against my former employer Unilever for some of those brands, which was absolutely exceptional. I then moved across into the into the world of chicken and into the kitchen. Literally, I joined KFC, spent 7 years with KFC in the marketing function, initially leading the marketing division. Again, got incredible global exposure. Joined the KFC, was appointed onto the KFC leadership team. Spent a bit of time in corporate affairs, and then joined a year ago, just over a year ago, moved across to join DSTV as executive head of marketing. And so really, I kind of summarize that for you guys, because there've been many pivots along the way, many different spaces, many different brands, but fundamentally, I've had to be Thabisa, who's passionate about brands, who's curious about what happens in the world of branding, and whether I'm doing it here or doing it in another country, or doing it in a different business, or buying businesses that are doing what I should be doing. It's been able to really kind of answer that question that I was never able to answer, and I couldn't answer as a 17-year-old, which is, what do you want to be? The funny thing is, I still can't tell you what I want to be. What I can tell you, though, is I think the answer to building that career within the context of digitization is answering a slightly different question. I think we should be answering the question that says, what do I want to be? And then you mix it up with, who do I want to be? And then you top it up with, what is the impact that I want to have? And somewhere between those three, what do I want to be? Who do I want to be? And what impact do I want to have? You will find the ability to choose, and you will build a resilience that will last you through any revolution that we may have into the future. Finally, on development, one of my biggest bugbears is having career discussions with people, or a mentorship discussion with people about their development, and the conversation goes something like this. So Tabs, please tell me, how do I line myself up for the next promotion? And then I often answer and say, what if there is no next promotion? What if the business shuts down? Then what are you going to do, right? Development is not about promotions. Promotions are kind of, I call them lighthouses of progression. They're lampposts that sign for you that you're growing and that you're developing, but they're not the end all and be all. You cannot develop yourself for a promotion. It will be a result of your development, but your core ideal should not be around that. The second thing is, for me, so what is it? For me, it's about building and creating with intent. Your career development really is about being intentional. Unilever and KFC were really pivotal for me in this, because they're so fundamentally evolved when it comes to personal development, and really kind of propelled, firstly, my own development, but secondly, my passion for development in its truest form. The biggest thing about personal development is it's about you. Your development plan cannot look like anyone else's, because you're unique and you're individual. I often describe it as development is about purposeful growth for a purpose. You're purposeful in how you grow because you have a purpose. So really connecting to those questions I just asked you guys, it really is about intentional growth. And guys, at the heart of this, it's about self-awareness. There is no growth without self-awareness. You have to begin by understanding yourself. And so when you do have self-awareness, even in the context of digitization, you need to really kind of look at it and go, okay, so where am I? If I look in the context of things, where's Thabisa? And what skill gaps does Thabisa have? What knowledge gaps does Thabisa have? What learning gaps does Thabisa have? It really is individualized, and you have to start at that place. You've got to have a really high level of self-awareness, which then enables you to seek feedback, to gain insight into the things that may let the computer beat you or may let the machine beat you. Someone will give you insight long before the machine beats you. I think if that chess player Mandisa had studied the machine and sought insight into his own style of chess, he would have found the insight as to how a computer or a machine programmed by a person would be able to beat him. The interesting thing about that story, right, is that AIs are built from the best in the world. So that computer was built using his plays. It was built using his playbook. It was built using his knowledge, his talent, and his gifting. And that holds true for us too. And so you seek out insights to see how you could grow. Business looks for three things, guys. Is what you have relevant? And what I want to say here, because I know the BMF is very entrepreneurial. Everybody got a side hustle. Learn to value your side hustle. Learn to put a value on your side hustle, because it may be the very thing that keeps you relevant. The second thing that business looks for is how distinctive is what you have. What do you bring to the table? Again, learn to embrace all of you. Part of what makes Thabisa distinctive is being born in the Transkei. It's understanding poverty that our people live in day to day. It's seeing it, it's living it, it's being female, it's being Black. All of that, all of me, don't leave parts of you out. All of you makes you distinctive, because you will be able to solve and put things on the table and perspectives that are really different. And the third piece is, do you lead culture? And what that is around is, business does not want people who just consume culture. And one of the things I've always aspired to and have been inspired by with the BMF is how the BMF has always led culture. It's always been at the forefront of having the conversations, constructively pushing the boundaries. That's what leading culture in an organization is about. Because when you have robots and you have digitalization happening, the one thing that they cannot replicate is culture in an organization. We cannot build an AI to drive the culture in an organization. And so organizations will look for leaders who will be able to lead culture and not just be consumers of culture. And so in closing off, what have I learned along my journey? I once had a very awkward meeting with the former CEO of Yum Brands globally, Mr. Greg Creed. He was in the country for a market visit and invited me to the Saxon to meet with him. I say uncomfortable because all I was thinking, guys, was, yo, this guy's a Fortune 500 CEO, my goodness. And so I arrived at the Saxon to meet with him, trying to balance myself. And he was sitting with his feet on the table. He offered me something to drink, and quite calmly we started chatting. He then said words to me that I've used and held on to, and I want to impart onto you guys today. Greg looked at me and said, Tabs, life is not school. You get to cheat. I looked at him a little awkwardly, and he said to me, see, Tabs, the thing is this. All through school and all through university, you are taught not to look over. You're taught not to cheat. Here's the thing. Life, business, and work is not school. The people who succeed are those who cheat the best. Look over, guys. Look to your left, look to your right. Someone's been there before you. And it's one of the things that's really built into how the BMF operates is you look left, you look right, and you find someone who's crossed that road before you. And so I encourage you guys tonight to take Greg's words too and build a cheat squad. You will only be as good as your cheat squad is. You ask me how I've built the career that I have. I learned to cheat. I learned to be the best cheater I can be. The second thing is around, regardless of what industry you're in or what career path you take, or whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're in the public sector, I've found that there are three things that you always have to be growing. One is execution. You need to do stuff. You need to be able, if you're hired to do A, deliver the boxes that you need to deliver. And find ways, because that's the piece of the puzzle that's been shifted the most by digitization, is how we execute what we do. The second part of this pillar is leadership. You have to always be growing your leadership. You have to always push yourself on being able to lead and lead more and lean into that space. The third one is strategy, and there's often this big myth around strategy. So my favorite description of strategy is the quality of your thinking. You must be a quality thinker. And so when you take that triangle and ask yourself, how am I doing on execution? How am I doing on the quality of my thinking? And how am I doing on my leadership? And how can I build those muscles longer? You will withstand any change, any transformation, any digitization technology that comes along when you're able to steadily build those. The third piece I sign off with you guys is there's knowledge, there's skill, and often we focus on study this, learn this, build this, do that. The one that people often forget about is attitude. Check yourself, guys. You gotta check yourself. Attitude is the thing. It's the one thing you cannot be coached out of. You cannot be mentored. I cannot sponsor your career if you have a really bad attitude. You have to check your attitude towards the change, towards the business, towards yourself, towards people. Make sure that your attitude is conducive to growth. Know your superpower and let it shine. We all have that thing that we do and we do well. And when we show up fully in that, we're irreplaceable. I hope that you all pursue it and find it and then let it shine. And then finally, hold the door open. Having had the pain and the privilege of being first Black this and first female this in my career, the tendency is to walk in, leave the door open and hope that it stays open. The reality is this, guys, unless you keep your hand on that door for the next person and the next person and the next person to walk through that door, the door will shut close when the wind blows. You cannot put a door stopper there. As we look into our career development in the midst of digitization, we have to hold the door open because we will be able to navigate the change so much better when we keep that door open and there's more of us at the table, there's a more representative table because it understands some of the challenges that we face. And so I really thank you guys for the opportunity to share, and I'm open to questions.
That was amazing. I've written down so many gems. Now I don't even know which one to start with. Thank you. Firstly, that was really great. I can tell from the comments from everyone as well that they were quite, everyone is quite inspired by this. And one of the things I noticed that a few people commented on was the piece around curiosity. And I think a lot of what you were talking about is kind of rooted in that, is that your execution can't be perfect if you're not curious because it's limited to a certain space. As a quality thinker, you have to be curious because you have to think about all the possibilities. Your attitude is gonna stay positive, or you can't have a positive attitude if you are not curious because your thinking is limited. And holding that door open, I think it's so important, it's something important to remember and understand, because one of the things you mentioned is learning from your team. And I think sometimes we think that you have to be in a leadership position to hold the door open. You can hold the door open for, people at the same level as yourself. But what it also does is that because you're curious, you will learn from those people that you're letting into the door. So whether they are, they come from a different background than you, they've got a different skill set than you, it leads to exactly what we're talking about, is digitization. Because if in your field, you don't fully understand what the progression is, holding that door open means that you're going to learn from the next people that are coming from you. So I am so inspired. Like I said, I've written so many notes, and that for me, like how you rounded that up, just made sense. And it also kind of made me think about myself in the workspace. Some of the times when I've let my attitude kind of hold me back, and then when you sit down and you're like, Mandisa, okay, and then you realize that actually it's you that's holding you back. And I think going back to the point about the chess master is exactly that, is that if your attitude is that I'm just coming with the hammer, you're not going to move forward because the world is going in a specific direction, so you'll be left behind. Oh, I just want to read a comment from Batabile, where she says, thank you for that comment you made about leaving the door open for enough representation. And I think this year, there's been a lot of focus around diversity, around inclusion. And again, for me, it's like, if there's more diversity, if there's more inclusion, there's opportunity for that progression and the moving forward and the learning, because you can't learn if there's no diversity. You'll just keep doing the same thing over and over. You know, and a comment from Grace, thank you, this was so insightful and inspiring. Definitely going to spend some time understanding what my superpower is, and absolutely love the idea of holding the door. And it's so interesting to see that those comments are coming from women as well. But one question I just wanted to ask you around finding that superpower, around that understanding that, you know, the growth comes from yourself. How did you, in your journey, come to that kind of realization and then apply it in your life?
Awesome. So thank you for that. I'm really passionate about that, Mandisa, and thank you for the comments, guys. Really appreciate them. So here's the thing about it. One, I think I was fortunate to have people around me who pushed me to identify what that was. They were as harsh with feedback, kind of on the tabs, these are your blind spots and your weaknesses and stuff, but also really harness the idea of, man, you do this well. Man, you do this well. And then kind of really, you know, one of my last CEOs spent a lot of time with me and going, you need to know what this is, because the very thing that makes Superman famous is the thing that almost gets him killed. And so where do you find it? You find it in two places. One is, if you have a good sense of what I'll call your Achilles, so the things you're not good at, when people give you feedback on that, your superpower is directly opposite to that. So, and that's why I love the example of the thing that gets Superman hears a woman cry, he rushes, and then yay, he's a hero. Or he hears a woman cry, rushes, and it's a bad guy, and he's almost going to get killed. And so really our development areas often point to the thing that we're really good at. And so I'll give you an example with me so that it's quite practical. One of my superpowers or my strengths, if you read my reviews from when I started at Unilever, people would say Thabisa is incredibly calm, she's incredibly mature, she's incredibly insightful. And so all of a sudden, I could see this pattern of insight and thinking and business maturity. She's a phenomenal communicator. And so as I started building that and knowing that about myself, but then also listening to feedback, constructive feedback of people saying, Tabs can check out, because I can check out. I can, because thinking is so important to me. So if I find a conversation doesn't stimulate me and I'm not connecting the dots, or I get from A to B really quickly, I then just check out. But then it's offensive to the person on the other side, right? And so one of the things I had to learn in moving in my superpower was then how to hold space for people. And half the time, even if I thought I'd solved a problem, if I stayed engaged, I'd solve it differently. And so I started finding those puzzles. So that's the one way to do it. Another great way to do it, though, is chat to family. Ask family very simply, what's the stuff that I've always liked to do? Like, are you the person who's convening things at home, always bringing people together, always? Your superpower cannot just be at the office.
Yeah.
It has to be consistent right through your life, because it's you. It is you at your best. When you're at your best, there's a way you come across, there's a confidence that you have. And so if as a kid, you were the kid who, which I definitely wasn't, where they'd be like, Jai, Lolo, and you're like, yes, with the latest style, right? There is a part of that. If you listen to a lot of entertainers who are world-class entertainers or comedians and stuff, they'll tell you about how even when there was kids, they were telling stories. So that's another really valuable place for you to go look to test it. I think if you look at your last kind of review and look at the feedback, the 360 feedback people gave you, but look at it with a different filter of, I'm actually looking for my superpower. I'm not looking to be cross at Mandisa that she said I was late for all her meetings. I'm actually looking at this to find out what people think and then test it with family.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for that. And I think that a lot of us don't spend a lot of time thinking, because one of the things you also mentioned was around constantly chasing a promotion. And I think that's how the world has kind of, that's how society is, right? Is that you go from step A to step B, and you look into your boss as the person who you're competing against, and you forget to think that actually you are the one that you're competing against. And I think from my perspective, that's probably why you mentioned something about, as Africa, we always leapfrogging when it comes to technology, versus having this kind of smooth journey that everyone gets to enjoy in more developed countries. And I think that's because of that, is that we're waiting to see, we're waiting for the promotion first before we can move forward. You touched on the 4 transformational technologies, right? And I think that I'm not sure what industry everyone else is in, and if they would understand that. And you said that we need to look at digitization as a gift, because then that changes our perspective. So I just wanted to quickly touch on that idea of seeing digitization as a gift. Obviously you work in a very innovative, well, you guys are the market leaders, so it would make sense. But when you think about something like Netflix that hit South Africa and no one was expecting it, because again, we've got this leapfrogging kind of perspective on things. And recently I saw Telkom has launched their streaming service, and I know that Showmax has made some changes to kind of improve that experience as well. I just wanted to touch on that quickly, is that as Africans, there are very specific industries that I think that our government kind of focuses on. So it would be your energy, it's your mining, and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that as Black professionals, we tend to want to go there because you know that that's where the funding is going to come from. How do we change the perspective of people? So you've got a company like Seacom that basically owns the internet. How do we bring that back into Black communities, make it more accessible to them so that they can start seeing this world, and not, getting fiber in Alex 5 years from now when the suburbs got it, way before? How do we make South Africans understand the importance of the direction that the world is moving in, so that in 5 years, when something hits in Europe, we also there, or maybe we could be the leaders in that field, because we're now not suddenly, focusing on just mining and farming and what have you.
No, totally. And I think to acknowledge firstly, what you spoke about, of there's certain industries that are perceived, and I'm going to use the word perceived, to be leading the digitization and the digital transformation in the country, because it's a perception around, because I guess we're more in the public eye, because technology is in a box and connected into your home, and you feel it immediately. The first thing I want to say is, one for me is around understanding the impact that you have, right? And what do I mean by that? There is change that we can drive as people who, so let me take accountants or financial managers or people in finance, who are responsible for building business models and optimizing business models, right? Now, unless the business model works, the conversation around technology and fiber into Epizana, where I'm from, becomes an incredibly difficult one. I think where we can make the change is because we understand the impact of fiber Epizana on the people who live there, and therefore their economic activity, and therefore they may come onto our business with an ARPU of 5 rands, but in 2 years' time, their ARPU will be 15 rands, and build those business models. We're able to do that. I think for me that there's a part of everywhere that you sit, you need to be thinking about, how do I take the insight and the knowledge that I have and convert it into the language that the decision maker speaks? because that is really our challenge. You have to convert your experiences, your knowledge, your insights into the language that the decision maker speaks. Now, if you have a decision maker, often, and I tell people this, I think in spreadsheets and speak in PowerPoint, because my decision makers are accountants. Everything I do in marketing and everything I do on the brand the decisions are made by accountants, and they want to know, Tabs, what's the ROI on this and what's this? So I have to take the concept, translate it into a language that my CEO, my CFO, pretty much all of them as CAs are going to understand and see the value of. And a big part of that is business models. And I think sometimes we want to have the conversations and not put in the analysis that we need to put in to show the business models. The second part of it is, I think we have to get better at building allies. We have to get better at finding allies within your organization, so people that you can pilot in. One of the tricks, guys, in business is always willing to test. There's always a testing budget somewhere. Wherever you work, there's always that little part somewhere that's for testing and POCing and whatever. Start there. Start with an intention of building the model and building the business case to go, let's test with one school exam. That if we brought digital transformation there, could we correlate their pass rates directly to this, which then builds a pipe fill for this, which answers why we are in business. And so even when I look at ourselves, right, the interesting thing is we look at ourselves as a business right now, and we push ourselves hard on digital transformation. We push ourselves hard on not only catching up, but leading. And I think that it's in the DNA of the multi-choice business because we've always pioneered in that space. But coming into it, I think a year ago, I was fascinated by how sophisticated our systems were. There's so much of what we do which is world best, but people just don't know it. There's so much of what we do in different industries where we have created kind of standards globally that we are not aware of. And I think it's about joining the dots. And, you know, I wish I had the full solution because I probably wouldn't be doing what I do now. But I think your question's fair on how do we connect the dots? And I think a big place to start for us is that translation into business language of the development stuff and the stuff that matters, so that it doesn't sit. One of my frustrations, Mandy, says a lot of that stuff ends up getting given to the CSI team. It lands up on corporate social responsibility and then out of the business funnel into corporate social responsibility, and then it will never grow. And I think when I talk about the translation, it's once we're able to translate it into business, it moves out of here back into the pipeline of the business as a growth pillar for the business.
Wow, thank you for that. I've never, you know, we had a session with Dr. Mabunda a while ago, and I asked him a similar question. And I've never thought about it that way, is that when we package what we need to get out there, and this is something I do every day at work, so it's funny that when thinking about these things, you don't think about it in the same filter because we're so used to boxing everything, right? Is that if you word something in a way that a legislator will understand, suddenly it opens up a whole new world versus the way that you want to speak at them. And they probably receive it as you speaking at me, which is why it becomes difficult for them to open that door for you. I see there are two questions, people wanting you to kind of delve into, maybe briefly, around the 12 digitalization elements that you mentioned earlier. Yeah, so if you could just maybe just a quick synopsis of that.
Okay, cool. So if you guys go on Google and just Google, because I can't go into them in depth, right? But they've packaged 14 technologies that are believed to be kind of the core technologies that will drive transformation across key industries. It is stuff like big data, it's AI, it's robotics, it is, what's the other one? The metaphysics one. So it's really a lot of stuff that various businesses have taken. And what a lot of businesses doing now is taking big data and kind of going, okay, cool, as a transformational technology, what does this mean into our business? Taking some of the metaphysics stuff or the AI stuff or robotics or whatever and going, okay, cool, as a law firm, what does robotics mean into our business? Because and actually interesting thing is when you ask someone who's not in that industry, immediately all of us, because we watch law TV shows that we watch, we literally all go into, imagine if lawyers had robots to do all the filing and the moving of the papers and the reading and finding stuff and whatever, our legal system actually could be cleared up in the next 2 years. Because what takes time in cases is the reading and the logging and all of that. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, wow, actually, I would have never thought robotics have a place in there. I just saw a note from someone around cybersecurity. It is one of the core things. As MultiChoice, we do have a cybersecurity business that's based in the Netherlands called Digitization. It's actually one of the biggest in the world right now. And that really has been us growing into attendance. And so when I talk about surrounding yourself with people, I have found someone in the Edeto business that I spend a coffee with just to ask them what they work on and what they do. Because for me, cybersecurity is passwords that are not strong enough. And it absolutely is, there's no such thing, right? And so there's about 14 of them. They grouped, I think, into 3 groups, if I remember properly. Some of them around data, some of them around kind of the robotic space and evolutions of each other. But generally looking across the top 500 organizations in the world, those are the 14 technologies that they have teams building across. So I think it's really fascinating. They're really easy to find. And then just play with them a little bit, ask yourself about the business, ask yourself about how much do I know about them? I mean, I had no idea. I was on a session and we were asked to name them, and I couldn't. And that for me, from my curiosity and my kind of, I was triggered, guys. I was like, yo, imagine, like, and other people were wrapping them off next to me. I was like, what is this? And so that really for me started a journey of exploring through those. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So guys, yes, let's use Google for the rest of those and see how we can use them in, in the spaces that we're in effectively. Then the last question that we have, and I think it's a question that comes up a lot when someone as esteemed as you is on a panel, and it's always around, it's kind of mentorship and sponsorship and that. So we have a question around whether you've had mentors actively help you grow in your career. And I just wanted to add on that is a lot of people ask this, right? And I think the assumption is always that in order for you to grow to a certain level, you must have mentorship or an active mentor that you're meeting with over a period of time and what have you. And I think that a lot of people, certainly given the very diverse backgrounds that we have in South Africa, I don't think everyone is as confident, right, to approach someone and say, mentor me. Not everyone is as privileged to be in a boardroom with people where they can see them performing and people taking a keen interest in them. And again, I'm gonna go back to your point around curiosity, right, is I have this idea in my head that, the higher I go in my career, because I don't have a mentor, right? So I'll start mentoring the people below me based on what I have and the potential I see in them and my interactions with them. And I actually get a lot from it because, again, I think that it's about holding that door open because I'm learning. I might not be learning at this level, but I'm learning, right? So again, around the curiosity, what is your advice? And not to take away from Nolita's question, because I still would like you to answer if you've had mentors and sponsors along your journey. But what is your advice to someone who's working at a big organization? I'll make yours as an example, working in the IT department, looking up to the guy that's based in Netherlands and thinking to themselves, how do I get a coffee with this guy? How do I ask them the questions that I want to ask them? And they don't necessarily have the opportunity to be in that boardroom. What are some of the tools that people can use to kind of, get to either a point where they mentored or how they can work themselves to a space where they self kind of teach up to get to that level?
Cool. So I want to bust some myths. Let me answer the first one around me. Have I had mentors? Yes, I have. I've been very fortunate to have people formally and informally lean into my growth and really actively participate in my growth and how I'm growing. I've had different ones at different times. I have had successful ones and unsuccessful ones. And what do I mean by that? I think you touched on something, Mandisa, around the chemistry and the understanding and the connection in a mentorship relationship. It's critical. And so, for example, I would be paired up, I'd be put on a leadership development thing globally and be paired up with, you know, a lady in Russia or in Australia or somewhere who's achieved something, and she'll make time available to meet with me. And I think I found some of those are really hard because you kind of getting to the meat of things and my context and all of that stuff was really hard, but they were still really valuable. I've also then had some that have been incredibly valuable to me, both from me pursuing a mentor, but also mainly from people kind of just always being at my shoulder, if I could call it that. I'd kind of turn and they're there, or they're in a meeting and they spontaneously come tell me straight after the meeting that, you know, T, job well done, or hey, just remember next time to think about this and think about that. Remember the audience. Remember to ask questions if you're going into a forum that you haven't gone into before. You know, it really touches on that concept of the cheat squad. And so I want to break into your question through this, and I'll move between both of them. One of the things, and it's something I'm really passionate about, one of the things and the mistakes I made in my journey is thinking, when I become bigger and when I become that person, then I will know enough and I will have arrived to be able then to be a mentor, right? The reality though now is I had more time available to me to really spend quality time with people and walk the journey with them a couple of years ago. I knew enough a couple of years ago to actually help someone who's a grad, transitioning into management or transitioning into an exco role or transitioning into a different space, right? And so that for me is the first learning for me, and mistake that I think a lot of us make is putting it off because you think you need to acquire more, and because you're benching yourself off your mentor. And, you know, one of my former CEOs, who was an incredible sponsor for me and an incredible mentor for me, described it this way. He said to me, Tabs, it's time I took your training wheels off. And mentorship really is about the stabilizing force of having training wheels on a bicycle. It's that person who holds you steady, even in spaces that you aren't steady. It also is about leapfrogging or missing certain, you know, when you're a baby, you can't miss developmental steps. So and they tell you when you've got babies that if they don't crawl, then they won't be good at maths. And if they don't build their gross motor skill or their fine motor skill, there's going to be this impact. And I think often we take that and apply it to being grown-ups. We kind of take if Mandisa doesn't feel the pain of working the 12-hour days and 16-hour days, you know, she's not going to be a great EXCO member. Absolute nonsense. I've gone through it, and particularly, I think, as Black and women in corporate environments, if I've gone through it, someone else shouldn't have to go through the same pain that I went through, right? And so there's a part of mentorship which is about that, which is about helping someone avoid certain standards that you went through, to learn how to navigate certain individuals in the business, or to learn how to navigate certain situations in the business. And it really is that pit stop. Now, let's talk about some of the practicalities, because I'm also really passionate about this part. One is around, you need to be very clear on why you want a mentor. What is it that you need from that individual that they have, and clearly articulate that to them. So I do have a number of people who reach out to me and go, Tabs, please could you mentor me? Please could you do this? And I had an individual reach out to me and say, can you be my mentor? Because I just want to put your name on my CV, that you are my mentor. And things will, I appreciated her honesty though, right? Because it didn't waste my time. She knew why she wanted, it wasn't right, but she knew why she wanted to do it. I think often we read leadership books or we hear people's stories, and this idea of mentorship becomes a thing that we think we need and a thing that we think we want, but then kind of go into it and it doesn't yield results. There are 3 things that you need to know about mentorship. One is exactly what I've said. You need to know why you need a mentor. So you must have a thing, that one big thing, which is, hey Tabs, I'm currently working on assertiveness as a leader. I'm really battling with, sharing ideas in big forums. And I'm hoping walking this journey with someone will fast track it for me. Being that direct about, here's the thing that I'm walking with. Or there's relationships where it's going longer term and going, Tabs, I'd love you to walk life with me. And so I can speak into your family life. I can speak into your work-life balance. I can speak into your career. I can speak into your marriage. I can speak into so many different spaces because the relationship is built. And from the foundations, it's about saying, hey, I'm a woman in business on my own as a leader, and it's really lonely. And so I need someone, even if you're not in the same building with me, I need someone to walk this thing with me, who understands what I'm going through, right? Those are different kind of mentorship relationships, and the depth you go into in some of those is very different to, a coffee where you just want to learn and want to ask questions and stuff. And so I think you have to be very clear on what you need from the person, because what you're asking the person for is to invest in you. They're investing time into you. You also need to be very clear from the start how long you want this relationship to be. So if it's a 3 to 6 month thing of, Tabs, I'm trying to make up my mind on my next business move. I know I'm not happy where I am right now, and I'm in the job market looking. I just need someone to walk this journey with me to help me make decisions. That's a 3-month thing, bang, slam, done. But if it's a longer term thing, you need to be very clear with the person right up front, the duration of the relationship that you're looking for, because that really impacts them making the decision. And then finally, guys, mentorship is a relationship that yields what you put into it. I can only give you answers to stuff that you ask me. If you come to a meeting with me and you're completely unprepared, you have no idea what you want to talk about, and you're like, oh, okay, Tabs, sure. Then now I'm going to sit there and say, okay, sure. Because it's your time. I hold time and space for you to leverage out of me whatever you need. And so I think it's so important that we are so clear and respectful of the mentors. And then finally, when you choose who to approach, because you know why you need a mentor, you'll be clear on who to choose. I also don't advise, you can skip level, but don't do 2 levels up. So like, don't go to a group. Like I couldn't go to Greg Creed and say, Greg Creed, could you mentor me? Because he was mentoring global CEOs from other markets, right? So you also need to have that understanding of skip level works, but once you go 2 up or 3 up, chances are that person's actually going to say no to you or say yes to you, but only see you once a year, which then also doesn't yield any result.
Well, that was very informative. Thank you. Oh, I love this comment by Gerald. Huge difference between mentor and sponsor. You need to know what you want, which is basically a summary of what you've said. And I think, again, thank you very much for your time tonight. I've certainly learned a lot, and based on everyone's comments on the chat, I think everyone also feels like they've benefited greatly from the session. So thank you. And I think, again, like our minds just kind of opened up to different sets of possibilities, different way of thinking, and kind of seeing how to approach our career, right? Not just your career, but within this topic that we're talking about. So I just wanted to kind of go back to, you know, as a summary of the chess story, right, is that a couple of years later, what happened was that the machines and a group of chess masters were put together, and they played a chess match, and in the end, no one really won. So it was a tie. And that ties back into what you said, is that ultimately what the chess master didn't realize at the time is that the machine was set up based on his capability, his knowledge, his previous experience. And I think as people, we tend to forget that in order for digitization to work, it needs human thinking. Robots are not taking over. You know, just like I was talking to a friend earlier, and I said, you know, in the early 1900s, before we moved into electricity, there was a guy physically putting coal into a unit, you know, in order for there to be warmth and light and what have you. And that changed into, you know, engineers and all of these kinds of people just driving that. And it's all about really seeing how we as humans can start working with technology and really driving that change in order to see, you know, and make the impact, which is something that I really love that you also said. So many gems tonight. So it was such a an exciting and learning, a huge learning for all of us. And yeah, thank you once again. I'm gonna hand over to Gao, who will do, you know, the thank yous on behalf of the BMF. And thank you to everyone for your time. We really appreciate your participation and your questions. It really made for a really enjoyable session. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to take this opportunity to appreciate our esteemed guest. Thank you for being a friend of the BMF. Most importantly, we will remember not to bring the hammer like the world's best chess master, but rather strive to pause, reflect, and envision on tonight's golden nugget. To the attendees, on behalf of the BMF, we thank you for choosing to spend the evening with us. And to those who wish to become BMF members, please visit our website on www.bmfonline.co.za. And please be on the lookout for upcoming BMF events. And lastly, to the team, thank you for organizing such an insightful event. That's it from me. Thank you very much and good evening.